In this lecture, we are going to be talking about bipolar disorder and how to deal with it properly. There are some ways, systems, techniques, and exercises that you can engage yourself in to help moderate and control bipolar disorder, whether we're talking about a manic episode or a depressive episode. First off, you need to identify the system and get familiar with it. Understand what you experience when you go through the different episodes. What kind of thoughts, feelings, and emotions do you experience when you're going through a manic episode? What kind of feelings, thoughts, and behavior do you experience when you're going through a depressive episode? Once you identify the system, you'll be able to tell when you are falling into a depressive episode or when you'll be going up into a manic or hypermanic episode. Next, you want to use personal experience-based coping skills and mechanisms. When you go through a manic episode, ask yourself, you want to base that on personal experience because it can be different for each and every person. When you're feeling manic, what can calm you down? What, on a personal level, can be a coping mechanism that can be followed as a formula to control either manic or depressive episodes? It can be meditation, it can be going for a walk, it can be going to the gym. Whatever it is, based on personal experience, you need to be able, after identifying the system overall, to find coping mechanisms and develop them as skill sets in your daily life. Next, after identifying the system and finding coping mechanisms, you will build an emergency plan for immediate action. As soon as you start noticing the symptoms, behaviors, feelings, and emotions linked to any of the episodes, you would have planned an emergency system based on the cognitive coping mechanisms that you developed through personal experience. And every time you notice that one of the episodes is developing, you will immediately switch into the emergency plan and system that you build up to cope with it properly, control it, and hopefully put a limit to it. Moreover, you might want to look into using external supportive leverage. Discuss this mental health issue with a trusted person, a sibling, a parent, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a friend. Go with them through the identification of those thoughts, behaviors, and emotions linked to each and every one of the episodes, and ask them to help you through it, especially when it comes to the coping mechanisms. Oftentimes, people going through depressive episodes, they report the following. Even if they knew what they had to do to overcome it, what the coping mechanisms are, they rarely find the motivation to be able to actually apply the coping mechanisms. But when you have external supportive leverage, when this trusted person would start to notice the symptoms of identification of any of the episodes, he can help you through finding the motivation to use the emergency plan and coping mechanisms that you identified. If you are going through a depressive episode, you wake up and you feel like you don't want to go to class, you don't want to study, your behavior would start to have implications towards a depressive episode. This external supportive leverage, whoever it is, can help you through convincing you and encouraging you to use the coping mechanisms. And finally, don't just identify the system as a whole, but you need to also identify the cause and effect. Usually, once you identify the system as a whole and the coping mechanisms you can follow, you need to start noticing what is it at certain instances that is developing those episodes. What are some triggers, or what is a stimulus that's developing into a depressive episode? What's another trigger that's developing into a manic episode? whether it's failing an exam, whether it's not sleeping properly, whether it's feeling empowered or feeling that your ego is inflated, whatever the trigger is, when you identify the system and you instantly start becoming aware of when you are shifting into a different episode, you can right there stop and reflect upon what was the cause of this switch. And once you identify it, you can start working towards avoiding it, or at least avoiding its consequences. And lastly, of course, the effect. How are you reacting when you're going through a depressive episode? And are you reacting in a positive way? How are you reacting when you're going through a hypomanic episode? And is it positive in any way? Once you identify the effects of the system and you notice those negative effects, you can also start using the coping mechanisms and the external leverage to avoid these reactions to the episodes. Because one of the worst parts of the bipolar disorder is the effect of those different episodes on our behavior, thoughts, and emotions. And once you're aware of the effects, you're conscious of them, you can start working on them on a conscious level to finally find a solution and be able to overcome this problem.